So today I will be interviewing a former teacher of mine. This will be Tery Binkerd. She is a former stage crew teacher. When I met her, she was working at Viewmont High School. I had just, as an angry teenager, just got kicked out of my house when I was living with my mom in East Midvale, moved up to Bountiful to live with my dad, went from Hillcrest to Viewmont. And I was part of the underground culture, right? Metalhead, fell in with the goth kids, and I was encouraged to look for a place among stage crew, and that was pretty good advice. There were a lot of people who, at least listened to the same music as I did, which made me feel safe. Anyone who saw that I'd walk around with a Slayer shirt or Marilyn Manson shirt uh, would immediately scream at me like I was some Satan worshiper, right? 1990s, man, was weird. A bunch of Mormon kids that would like scream obscenities at me and then walk around like how cool they were and how holy they were, just how much they believed in what they said. Threatened every day. Nearly had to defend myself every day. And Tery was somebody who helped corral a lot of lost kids and give them a sense of direction, which is pretty awesome. Saving a bunch of nihilistic, angry kids, give them some direction, help them be part of a community. That's pretty awesome, man. I found that I've had a lot of people in my life that have offered me that. I'm not always aware of it at the time because, I mean, the hell do I know, especially being young. Older now, it's much easier to see that, and I like to give back. I like to say thanks to people who've been there for me, especially as a youngin. And Tery is somebody who I've admired for a long time. I don't expect to agree on everything with her, but I'd really like to talk about kind of some hubbub around HB 234. So this is a House bill. It's not going to go forward anymore. But it was going to make sure that I believe there was a month advance time that teachers had to have all their curriculum submitted to the school board in order to show what it was that they were going to teach so that they can be robbed of any sort of sense of like dynamic, teaching fluency. Seems to me like trying to turn kids into robots. Seems to me like it's another way to try to make sure that we are measuring testing scores, which like is just a fail, and our education system is terrible. And if passing a test was a wonderful way to like show a measurement of an education, well, this may not be so bad, but it's not. And so I'm suspicious of this bill. To be honest, I'm glad it's not going through. That said, it's certainly possible that there's something about this bill that I don't know that could make it be quite possible. But I'd really be more interested in a teacher, right? Teachers often are kind of bounced back and forth, and they are this political ping pong ball. And I think it would be nice to hear a teacher's perspective on kind of her thoughts on this bill, what kind of made her feel pretty up in arms about it, and then get some true, authentic thoughts. It looks like looks like Tery is starting to hop in. So without further ado, oh my goodness, there she is.
There she is.
What? How are you?
I'm good.
That's
I'm
cool.
good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. It's a little weird, little cog dis inspiring me that I can have a little bit of pepper flaking in my hair. Then I see nothing but
Yeah.
nothing but gray in yours. Yeah.
Well,
Um,
it's not completely.
I like
There's
it.
still, yeah,
Okay. So you got this
yeah.
two rivers braid going on, huh? I like
Oh
it.
yeah.
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 Okay. Okay. Well, part of what I wanted to do, well, selfishly, right? I've
Yeah.
wanted to connect for a while, right? You're
Hmm.
somebody who, added some meaningful encouragement and guidance to a bunch of lost shitheads, maybe.
Some
um,
of them were, I call them zits
oh,
because I just want to pop their heads off.
sure, nice, man. I like that. I like that. That's gross, but I like that. The pimple, right? The pimple doctor. There's a reason why she's freaking popular.
Yeah, I can't watch that, but boy, I can sure think of popping some students' heads off.
That's funny. Well, and so I'd like to start a little bit about a little off about your background. I'd
Mhm.
like to also, maybe we can delve a little bit about like if you even remember, right, the late 90s all that well of
Oh
when we
yeah,
interacted. Okay.
yeah, yeah. That
And
was
then maybe get into, House Bill, even though it's not going to go forward anymore. But House Bill 234 and kind of figure out some of your authentic thoughts and some of the struggles as a teacher, what it is that you see that this kind of maybe stifles in your ability as a career. And I'd like
yeah,
to kind of explore that a little bit and get your perspective as opposed to, right, just some ham-fisted legislation.
yeah. Okay, sounds good.
So why don't you start me off with a little bit about your background?
Well, I'm kind of got into languages when I was in high school. It was like well, actually, Spanish was the first subject I was ever really successful in because it
Mm,
was taught visually, and I'm quite learning disabled. I've got I'm dyslexic, and there's a whole bunch of stuff going on, which I'm not supposed to be succeeding in the places that I'm succeeding in. So, but that's because those are labels,
mm,
and I'm not gonna. You look at it, and learning disabled kids are actually really bright,
mm.
and knowing that gave me a different way to treat them when I got there. But I went to college for um, majored in, well, when I finally got to where I could take Latin, I went overboard and majored in it because I'd been told my whole life, take Latin, take Latin, take Latin, and there was never an opportunity. So I finally did and went overboard, and kind of found myself a little adrift when I got out of college, because my whole thing was get to college. And when I finished that, it was like, now what do I do? Got thrown off a horse but just before my senior year, and had a very long healing process. So I went through my senior year, and then I still wasn't fit to work. So mom had given me for Christmas a Sanskrit course, because college was cheap enough back then that you could give somebody a course for Christmas. And it was
Right. It wasn't like a 5-year obligation.
yeah, yeah. And then got my master's in linguistics because still it wasn't fit to work. Thought, go to school, it gives me a reason to get up in the morning. It's something I'm always interested in, and really scratched a lot of intellectual itches that I had. That was one of the best things I could have done. Got out and still kind of going, now what am I going to do with myself? I deliberately did not major in anything that could be taught, that could be certified as a teacher in the state of Utah, because I didn't want to be a teacher.
Sure.
I didn't think I had the personality, didn't think I had the patience, didn't think it was for me. And so my sister, knowing that I was kind of wandering, got me in as a sub at Viewmont. And I'm thinking, okay, I could do this for a while. I could do this till I could roll up a stake and get back into college and get my PhD in Latin. And I
Hmm.
thought maybe teaching in college would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then, so now you've heard my background and you've heard nothing about stage, right?
Right, nothing, yeah, which is, but when I met you, right, you were also big in Latin. I mean, there were
Yeah,
some times where wink, 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 right? Well, like you already knew some of us just weren't going to do school anyway, and so like
yeah,
you provided us a meaningful place to like, hey, you know what? At least come here and get out of trouble and like go build
yeah,
something, guys. And it's like, oh my
yeah.
God, like if more people could actually have that, like, how about I
Oh,
don't just go out and just don't just act a fool outside of school property. How about I actually at
yeah,
least have some structure with somebody who actually has my best interests in mind, and then I do something productive for
yeah.
the community. Double entendre there, productive, right?
Yes.
Kind of like that. Yeah. But like
Yeah,
that's something I admired about you, and I like that. And I
thank you.
think it makes sense. You're welcome, and it makes sense that you come from a place where you're undervalued And so
Yeah.
you see people who are also often undervalued, and you look to kind of polish off, right, that diamond a little bit.
Yes, and that's one thing that I loved so much about that. But getting into stage was a total accident. I had always watched the production part of things when I went. Wasn't allowed to open and close the front drapes in the family living room because I wanted to open them like a traveler, and household stuff is just not meant to do that. So what happened was, uh, the year before, in 1993, just before the school year started, the guy that was running the stage crew quit. He just walked out,
Whoa.
and they gave it to the drama teacher, who, as we know, was not really a drama teacher. He was an actor with a day job.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks before the musical, he still hadn't set foot in the auditorium to do anything with the show. And McGuire just said, I can't work like this. Let's bring in Tery. She'll be able to do it. And the reason she knew was because during my subbing, I had subbed for the stage crew teacher, and she gave me a list for Pirates of Penzance and said, this is what needs to be done today, while I was subbing. And I came back to her half an hour later and said, what else you got? She says, no, I need this list done. I have to have this list done. It's done. Well, no, and I'm like, I did it. And the kids, we just had a good time doing it. And
Yeah.
we went through 3 days worth of lists because, we just got down and did it. And so she called me in, and it was a case of, you either put on the music, you either help us get the musical out off the ground, or it's not going to happen. And it worked. She thought we'd have 26 light cues. We ended up with 23.
Wow.
Yeah. And just because of the state the program was in and all that kind of stuff. And then Bonnie Pierce went and said, well, Jean got Tery, why can't I have Tery? And then I got hired to do stage crew. And as soon as that year was over, I went down to Oasis and said, I need help. I've got a stage crew and I have no idea what I'm doing. So it was a total accident, and I was a complete faker the whole time. Well, not the whole time, but
there's beauty in that though, right?
Yeah.
If you know that you have real skills, and you know that you can kind of command authority, and that like you're like Queen Misfit, and like all these misfit kids like see that authority coming off of you, and they just kind of fall in line, and you direct them, hey, go do that. Like, there's very few things that made me feel seen, like being a 16, 17-year-old that gets screamed at every single day, walking down the halls of Viewmont every single day. Effing Satan worshiper, effing goat kill. Like, what, man? I'm wearing a Slayer shirt. I get it, dude. I get that scary things are scary to you, but like, can you maybe like quit clutching your pearls the second I walk by? But then like I did something, right? I built this, man. Like, it's cool.
Yeah. And that was what I loved, was because the kids that were attracted to that were the misfits and were the lost ones and had nowhere to go, and were scheduled to drop out by Christmas of their sophomore year, and are now running theaters in somewhere in the valley.
Yeah.
And I loved that it attracted that, because being a misfit myself, I knew what it was like. And I knew that if I could just get them a place where they were loved and valued and taught really nice skills, I knew that I could make a difference. I didn't realize how much of a difference I could make, but I knew that for an hour and a half, they'd be okay. And that was the absolute best thing ever. And it was really good. And best thing ever.
Yeah. I mean, like I was in a place, right, because of just the psychological bombardment every day. I just like also this. And so if you remember Cordray Cox, he and I used to so he and I would just bounce and we just leave.
Yes.
And so I think out of the A and B days, so 4 days, 4 classes A days, 4 classes B days, I think I went to 3 classes out of all 8. and I think two of them were yours, if I
Yeah,
recall.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, man, it's just oh, speaking of helping lost people, Megan Perry, remember her?
Yes.
So she came back in town with also Taryn Huber a few years back. And so,
Oh,
yeah, we got together. Cordray came
good.
down. We were hanging out, and then she shared with me an anecdote that, I mean, it's tragic, but I mean that's life. So Dave Reed. So there's another name, right? Remember Dave?
Oh,
So Dave was somebody who
heartbreak.
couldn't help but get in trouble. He just couldn't
No.
help it, right? His like the people around him and his family just would enable the worst parts of him and his brother, and eventually he found
Mhm.
his way back into jail, and then and then he eventually died. But apparently,
Oh,
oh yeah, he's dead. Yeah.
oh my goodness.
So apparently Megan was saying that going through, I'm not sure how she got this, but going through some of his psychological profile and talking to people, apparently he had an incredibly stable period, and it was from like 16 to 18,
Hmm.
and it was the most stable period of his life. It sounds like.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And that's when he was one of my boys.
Yep. Exactly.
He could have been a really good man if he'd had someone to show him how.
Yep. I mean, that's what I mean. I suspect that 90% of the people that were like freaking out in Minnesota, rioting, breaking windows, and 90% of the people that are freaking out storming the Capitol are
Yeah,
also just good people who are just
yeah,
scared, man.
yeah,
Scared. And like,
yeah.
I was told that like if I'm hanging out with Tery Binkerd and there's a crowded theater, I'm like, bomb, 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 bomb. And everyone like freaks out and runs away and like tramples a bunch of people on the way out. Like I'm the
Mhm.
one at fault, man.
Oh
But
yeah.
here, yeah, here we are, black bagging and taking people to prison who have no money and no power. Like, how dare you be scared and desperate and listen to people in power? It's like, come on,
Yeah.
man. Well, I mean, what gives? And so
Yeah.
having somebody in authority that can actually help direct somebody who's lost, like that really is powerful. And I
Yeah.
wanted to share that with you because again, it's tragic. It's tragic what happened to Dave, but that's outside of
Yeah.
your control. What was in your control, you gave him something that he didn't have anywhere else.
Yeah. I did everything for him that I could,
Yeah.
and he had that. So
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I'd like to see, right? So I'm going to be running for Utah State Legislature this year. It will be my House district. I will be
Yeah.
announcing the exact House district later on this month. But that I hope that my deep ties to Salt Lake Underground, in a Jungian way, right,
Yeah.
will really help
Yeah.
me be better. Because if you want to be a tree of life that extends into heaven, well,
Mm-hmm.
you better damn well have some roots that descend way into the muck and misery of hell in order to
Oh yeah.
stabilize, because that's where the nutrients are, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's exactly it. It's
Um,
exactly it.
and so in all of your experience as a teacher, it seems that we've really been just, I mean, hyper driving towards, can you pass a test, right? This short term kind
Mhm.
of cash. As soon as you pass the test, no longer need
Yeah.
that in my brain. I'm now moving forward, passing the
Core
next
dump.
test. No longer need that in my brain. Just I don't need anything outside of my working memory. Nothing needs to
Yeah.
be stored in my long-term memory. And so
Yeah. I call it a
what are some
core
of the
dump.
struggles there?
Um, there are a lot of things that people don't realize build. And what I now have a Latin program through USU.
Cool.
CE. Yeah.
Yeah.
um, but a lot of things build on themselves, and you take what you have and use it with what you get. And a lot of people just don't understand that. They don't see it because all they care about is the test. And I would like to get rid of tests completely.
Oh, look
I
at you.
think,
You're speaking Finnish right now, huh?
uh-huh. Yeah, I'm Scandinavian by culture and heritage. And I think they've got a lot of right things, but I would get rid of tests completely because they're just, there's more to life than tests. Learning should be for life, not for a test.
Well, I like that. I think that if you learn, if you're only learning a test, well, you're learning a what and so now you're walking around with a square peg and you're just constantly looking for a square hole.
Yeah,
However, if
that's
you
not
look through the
education.
yeah, if you look through the lens of my favorite astrophysicist, Neil deGrasse Tyson, he says those who know how to think are
Yeah,
empowered far beyond those who know only what to think.
what
If
to
you walk
think.
around with a what, well, you're constantly just looking, hey, does my peg fit? Right.
Yeah,
And then that's usually not the case. Usually your peg won't fit. But if you know how, well, then you can kind of conform your thoughts to the
yeah,
situation.
and that was exactly what my professors in college would say, is in defense of liberal education, saying if you are trained to think, you can go into any situation and do it. That's how come I could go into the auditorium not knowing anything about how to run a stage and run a stage, because I knew how to think and I knew where to find resources. There were a lot of times where something would come up that was baffling. Well, in the early years, I then went through the union apprenticeship program
Hmm.
and learned everything that I could, took master classes with the guy that wrote the stage rigging handbook,
Nice.
stuff like that. But because I knew how to think, I could do it. And sometimes when things would baffle me, I go, and walk out, go into Gene's office, find a phone, call Oasis. What am I supposed to do with this? Oh, this. You mean, oh, okay, thank you. And then I go back and do it.
You know, the beauty about that though is that fake it till you make
So you
it
make it.
really is a viable strategy
It's
if
a
you
thing.
intend to make it. If you don't intend to make
Yes.
it, you're going to wash out. But if you do
Yeah.
intend to make it, you're going to go into somebody's office, you're going to make phone calls, you're like, yo,
Uh-huh.
I'm lost. I don't like this
Yep.
imposter syndrome. I'm a little afraid of it. Help me.
Uh-huh.
Help me. Yeah.
Yeah. And for several years, I was the biggest faker in the entire world. But it worked because I made it. So,
Good for you. That's
yeah.
cool. And it's, I mean, standing up for kids, right? There's something about that, and it sticks in your head for the rest of your life, right? Not just you,
Yeah.
like even Miss Bean, right? So I
Oh,
had,
Bean.
I had,
Oh, Bean.
you know,
Yeah.
so Lou, so again, so here I come from an environment where my mom is not a very mentally stable person. Boots me out of the
Mhm.
house, sends me to live with my dad. My dad is somebody who's just like, hey, as long as I don't interrupt what he's doing, like watching TV, then like chances are he's pretty happy.
Yeah.
Um, and so then I joined this environment where like even where I came from, it was much more liberal in Hillcrest than it was Viewmont. But even still, man, I couldn't
Oh,
help but
yeah.
like be screamed at every day. So then I go to Viewmont, it's even worse.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
That was,
and so Lou like she saw something in me because
yeah.
I mean I can talk, right? And so even if I'm stuck in my anger, I can still articulate, say, okay, there's something here. And so she even let me type on her computer. It's like, hey, it
Yeah.
doesn't look like that you're comfortable writing. What if you just sit at the computer? It's like, hell yeah, I can type.
Yeah.
Um, and so I went up there, I was typing. I mean, I went from, talking about, when, 15 doing beer runs, stealing beer with my friends to like, finding, just like I liked surgeries. I liked, my friend and I were watching like this autopsy video, like, man, that's really cool looking. And they're like, hey,
Yeah.
we're weird. Like, what if we go do something cool? It's like, hey, you know what? There's a dead cat. What if we just kind of like figure out anatomy? And then, so I started writing about that. Well, I printed
Yeah.
that off. When I printed it off, I did not have the wherewithal to be like, hey, where's this going to print? I
Oh,
apparently,
no.
I apparently printed it, and Vicky Ingram was like, and so Lou Bean goes up there and they're like, do you know? Yes, I do. Actually, thank you.
Yeah.
And she walked out.
Yeah.
It's like, my God, like,
Hmm.
so when you've got my back, like she asked me to be creative, and boy was I. Within like 20
Yeah.
minutes, I had like 4 pages of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and like that's what she wanted, man. Like I'm not here
Yeah.
to thought police you. I'm here to
Nope.
pull that out of you, and then let's help calibrate that how to think.
Yeah. Yeah. And guess who my mentor is? Bean.
Lou,
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
We share a birthday,
Yeah, that's so
which
cool.
I think is absolutely wonderful. Yeah, she was my mentor. And so a lot of my ideas and practices came from her.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
which was,
she was so happy and like
oh, I
easy to
know.
like just drawn to. Like her goodness, she just
Yeah.
radiates goodness, man.
Yeah. Yeah. one of the best people I ever have met.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
for sure.
yeah, and that's what our goal is see what's in that kid and see if we can get it out of them.
And if say HB 234 did go through and say
Mhm.
you and Lou did have to go ahead and have like, a month's worth of curriculum,
A year's worth.
oh my God, was it a year's?
It's a
I
year.
thought it was a month at a time. Jesus.
It's a
Okay, so you
year.
got the entire year. So then you're like this automaton and you're
You
not really
quit.
even, so you're, oh yeah. So like what would that rob? Like let's say that you're there, like what would that even rob of you if you were forced to be a like,
Everything. Um, you would have to lockstep, because in order to vary from your lesson plan, you have to give them 5 days notice to a committee.
that's what the weak thing is I was reading. Okay.
Yeah, that's what that is. And then so your kids don't get what you're teaching. Tough. We have to stay on the schedule. We have to go ahead. We have to keep moving. We can't remediate. We can't do anything. We are on this schedule, and that's where we are. Say the kids get ahead. Well, tough. Be bored. Because even though you got this, we have to stay on this schedule. What if some interesting line of inquiry comes up? We're reading something or writing something or talking about something, and somebody says, "Hey, what about this?" Sorry, no inquiry, no creativity, nothing. We have to lockstep with this because I'll tell you, we'll discuss this in 5 days when I've gotten permission to pursue this line of inquiry.
Oh man, once you walk to Mordor, then we'll go ahead and talk about it, right? So,
Yeah,
oh
yeah,
my God, man, that's rough.
yeah. That's what it's about, and that's why everybody hit the fan.
Yeah. So,
And trying to get it back again, and he
h-
just needs to disappear. He
how do we
needs to get off.
sterilize education to the point where everyone hates it? It almost sounds
Well,
like.
that's what they've been trying to do. Um, there's a book that I was supposed to read in education, and it was about the history of schools in America,
Hmm.
and it's called Education: America's Troubled Crusade.
Hmm.
I think that says it all right there. But
There's,
yeah, they're trying. Teachers are quite seen as the enemy, and as someone who is as people who are trying to corrupt the kids, and I I don't know what, but and also we're seen as extremely lazy, and so they try and get things to, oh, we're going to make you accountable, we're going to make you uh going to make sure that you're working, and it's a really hard thing to deal with, because the good teachers are some of the hardest working people I know, and the good teachers have the interest of kids at heart. If we could indoctrinate them, do you think they'd turn in late assignments? Do you think they'd be out of control in the classroom and messy if we could indoctrinate them like everybody thinks that we're doing? Don't you think they'd be little soldiers and little robots and marching to our drummer? Which some teachers, yeah, I'll admit, not everybody's wonderful, but that's what it is to be a teacher. When the legislature meets, morale in the faculty room drops because they try and see what they can do to make our life a little bit more miserable and our job more difficult.
what's interesting
And
about that, is this is the way that people treat each other, like in every
yes,
realm.
yes.
2021 ended up, without me going too deep into it, 2021 what ended up being like the worst year of my life that then
Mm.
ended with the greatest path to glory that I could ever have asked for,
Oh,
which is
good.
so strange, right?
Yeah.
I went from deciding like, well, I was a bit so a bit of a coward. I decided that I'm so miserable right now that I need to separate, right? I see that I'm a good person. I see my wife's a good person. We want to take care of our kids. I'm a bit of a
Yeah.
psychological coward. I don't want to invest anything. I just need to separate because I'm broken too much. And so I'm going to turn my back on this vow that I made to my family. And the day I did it, the day I moved out, weren't divorced yet, but the day I moved out, it was like something was watching me. It's like, oh, really? You're gonna save yourself, huh? And from day one, it just like, what the F did I just do? And
Yeah.
then it made me stronger. And because I was in hell. And then Winston Churchill talks about, if you're in hell, well, keep going. Okay, well,
Yeah.
how do I keep going? Okay, well, then I started looking up like Jocko Willink, Navy SEAL, who helped me build up some personal responsibility and stoic strength, and be like, yeah, you might be in hell, but guess what? Right? You can actually, like, you know, create a meaningful path to walk out of there. And then I got, into even Jordan Peterson, which is a hot button person, but who helped me understand,
Mhm.
like, well, look, man, if you actually quit bitching and you actually look to yourself as a sense of strength, and see a higher purpose, well, you're going to find a way to be able to, instead of just sacrificing and staying where you are and being miserable, you're going to find a way to
Yeah.
sacrifice and invest in yourself.
There you
um
go.
and so once I started thinking that way, I was like, oh my God. Well, I got invited to an emotional resilience class put on by the LGS church, because in this
Hmm.
space where I'm starting to open myself up to this goodness, like legit, I started having like these visions. Like, what does this mean? I started like, hey, I need to go speak at the Mormon church. Like, what does that even mean? Like, how do I just go speak at the Mormon? Like, I'm not a Mormon, so this is very,
Yeah.
yeah, very weird to me. So I started talking to my friends. Well, actually, they tell me that the first Sunday of every month is fast and testimonial meeting, where anybody can go up
Hmm.
there and say
And
whatever
get
they
up and
want.
talk,
Like,
open mic.
anybody, huh? Hmm.
Yeah.
And then they started laughing, and I was like, no, man, like, I'm gonna treat them with respect. Well, then I got to the point where, what if somebody says something and it's just that they suck at articulating it. It's not that they're dumb. It's not that they're stupid.
Yeah.
Just that they suck at
Yeah.
articulating it, and it's up to me to figure out, like, hey, there's something they're trying to say, and what if I take a
Uh-huh.
little bit of time to steel man that, instead of just straw manning and then thwacking it and be like, and then coming off like Dr. Phil, like, how did you write my
Uh,
book? Don't you know how smart I am? Um,
yeah.
and
Aren't they wonderful?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and so we were in this emotional resilience class, which is all about like building, emotional resilience, like basically aimed, and you through a foundation of God.
Yeah.
And so they had this book that we'd go through. And me being a philosophical person, like, I mean, I've been reading like Plato's Great Dialogue since I was like 17, reading
Oh,
Nietzsche at
yeah.
the same time. And
Yeah.
so I get there, and like they start talking, and they start talking about their spirituality. It's like, okay, I can identify that. And I just reach in, I just start like pulling it out of them. I start sharing, as I'm sharing of my own heart, like the deepest levels, like existential philosophy. They open up. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
so you guys are exactly like me. But then the facilitator is like, nope, 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 nope. Let's bring it back. And
Oh,
then, yeah. Well, and because I mean, they don't want to be there for like 4 hours, but
yeah.
at
Yeah.
the
They're,
same time, so we were there for a 2 hour class. I walked out with a couple, and then I was talking to them, and the lady in this couple was saying just how frustrated she gets with empty words. People just go up there and say empty words that really are pretty meaningless, and I have a hard time with that too.
yeah.
Like somebody who stands up and just like, brothers and sisters, I know in my heart that Joseph Smith is the one true prophet. It's like, hey, that's cool, man, but what does that mean to you? Like, don't just tell
Yeah.
me something that somebody else, like, what does that actually mean to you? I
Yeah.
know in my heart that the Book of Mormon is the one true, word. It's like, okay, again, man, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
And so I shared with her that literally when I'm in church and somebody says that to me, I actively play this game where I say, hey, this person's telling me this is the greatest idea of goodness of which they can conceive of, which then
Hmm.
forces me to think, well, it's the greatest idea of goodness that I'm forced to conceive of. And there's
Yeah.
no world where forcing myself to articulate that, and think about it and start to construct that. There's no world where I don't get better. I spent 3 minutes with that couple, and like her eyes got bigger. There's a lady who goes to church every week, and I just
Oh,
barely
yeah.
started. She's like, you know what? That's so much better than what I do. And I just got more out of just this little interaction than the entire 2 hours in there. And so
Mhm.
people want that. People want that dynamic. They want to be able to be
Yes.
seen and not like, hey, you're just this, you're not supposed to be heard. You're not a valuable member. I've got to pump this information into your head
Into you.
because I don't
Yeah.
really care about you. I just have a checkbox that I need to go
Yeah.
ahead.
And that's what really irritates me about the way mathematics is taught. Because they have this list of things that they have, these concepts that they have to teach,
Yeah.
but they mean nothing because they don't give real world application. And if you ask
Mhm.
for real world application, you're told to stop being a smart aleck and learn the stuff.
Yeah. Oh, you'll use it later, Terry. Well, quit being a
Yeah,
smart aleck. Yeah.
yeah. Don't be a smart aleck, just learn it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, no, I will be interested in learning it if I have an application for it. And then I get into foreign language education, and we come up with a word called, or a phrase that's comprehensible input. If it's not comprehensible, it doesn't matter. If the kids, you can stand up and give them all the immersion and talk to them only in the target language all you want, they're saying it doesn't matter. And I'm thinking, that's exactly where math is off the rails. Their input's not comprehensible. They're given answers, but never the problem that those answers solve.
Mm, Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah. Well, why I should even care, right?
yeah, because I have a friend who's a math teacher, and she thinks completely mathematically. She has no literature in her soul whatsoever. It's no poetry in her soul, but we work together, and on stuff. We're good friends, and so I've helped her put her house together. She moved into a little double wide, and when she hung her clothes in the closet, the whole thing came down. And so, of course, I went up there with my carpentry skills and my tools, and we started to put it together. And she showed me some stuff that comes from mathematics that blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. How to find the center of a stud. And she says, well, that's a geometry thing. And I'm like, do the kids know about this? Well, I'm sure they do. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why don't you make it comprehensible? Why don't you tell them this kind of stuff? Well, there's so much we have to get through. No, make it comprehensible. And that's the same way with spiritual matters. Don't check
Mm,
boxes. It has to be comprehensible.
yeah.
If the input's not comprehensible, you're wasting your time. And also, one thing I've discovered with spiritual matters too, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
I literally have found that in my boss right now. So my
Yeah,
like for real. Like so as
yeah.
I so for it was 2 months time, but by my third testimonial meeting. So here I am listening to this vision. It's only been two
Yeah,
months time. I went from an environment where I worked in pediatrics at the University of Utah for
yeah.
almost 7 years. Um, and or sorry, almost 6 years. And I went from pediatric medical research over into pediatric medical outpatient data. And so I worked with doctors who would look at these giant Tableau data sets and like,
Yes. I don't know what to do with
yeah.
this.
And so
Yeah.
my boss was even like, dude, I don't really know what to do. We don't really know what to do. We need you to figure it out. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
that's a little daunting, but I'm a clever guy, right? How to think,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
Um, and so first things first, if you don't care about the fact that I'm giving you meaningful data, well, you're not going to care. So how do I get you
No.
to care? Right? I get a little bit of
Yeah.
endorphins swimming in your head.
Yeah.
So like I'd be talking to like, I mean, there were some doctors, I mean, just flat out like this beautiful white doctor, and I started throwing out this like Jerry Maguire quote. And so I'm Jerry Maguire, which makes her Cuba Gooding Jr. And she immediately starts laughing. And it's
Uh-huh.
like, gotcha. And then now that they're
Yep.
laughing and they like me and I'm safe, well, let me actually
Yeah.
show you what I want to show you. Let me make sure I build a little
Yeah.
rapport. Let me make sure that I show that, hey, I understand that you're human. Let me show that it's
Uh-huh.
okay to ask me questions, and put me on the
Yes.
spot. I'm a big boy. Um,
Hmm.
and let me show you, what I feel is meaningful. But now that I've shown that it's safe to have a dynamic, I just showed you what I thought was meaningful, man. This is me just throwing mud at the wall because this is the first iteration. Help me kind of turn this into like a happy little tree over here, happy little landscape. And like let's fill, let's make sure that we're building this picture together. So it's
Yeah.
driving. Well, from doing that, the chair of pediatrics emailed me directly. So like this is like probably the only person who has more power than him is like the president of the university, or maybe like the CEO of Huntsman's Cancer Research. Like other than that, this
Yeah.
guy's about as high as they go. He said, Josh, if you had a superpower, it's giving meaningful feedback and encouragement to others. It's like, my God, man. One, thank
Wow.
you. Yeah, right. One, thank you.
Yeah.
Two, we're in a pandemic, bro. We're in a pandemic. Does
Hmm.
this come with extra pay? It's like, attaboy. It's like, come on, man. So the problem with a lot of, and what we're kind of discussing even with the curriculum with House Bill 234 is that we want to take
Yeah.
a cookie cutter to people and we smash it on them, and whatever gets cut off,
Yes.
we throw away into the refuse heap. As if it
Yes.
wasn't useful because we're incompetent
Yeah.
at measuring its
It's
usefulness.
not
And somehow
important.
that's your fault that
Yes.
I can't measure it.
Uh-huh. Exactly. And
And
that's one thing also that's wrong with mathematics is their their curriculum and how far they have to get and how much they have to teach has been legislated.
yeah.
And so they have no time to make it real, make it interesting, make it useful.
Hmm.
And if they were left to their own devices and could teach less stuff, but teach it deeper, you'd turn out people that were mathematical thinkers that could take this stuff and solve problems and stuff like that. But
Yep.
we've got to have those tests, and they've got to hit these benchmarks. And even kids that are not mathematically inclined have to hit certain benchmarks in mathematics, and they drown. And that's okay because they're hitting the benchmarks, and they're miserable, but they're hitting the benchmarks.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and feeding misery into further misery, right? I mean, these are kids that likely have parents that both work, who likely don't get a
Yeah.
lot of face time with their parents, who likely are
Yep.
starving for attention and starving for
Yep.
direction. And then they have to go sit down in an environment where they're freaking miserable. They don't feel like they're learning anything. There's really no practical application,
Yeah.
because nobody's showing them where the practical application is. And you're robbing people of the ability to be that scientific philosopher. Richard Feynman.
Yeah.
I use his quote. Dude, I've used Richard Feynman quotes in my testimonials that I've now turned into videos. And one of them that
Yes.
I love is poets say science takes away from the beauty of the stars, mere globs of gas atoms. I too can see the stars on a desert night and feel them, but do I see less or more?
Exactly.
Right? You might
That's
see
one.
a wall. You might know that there's a stud there. I can
Uh-huh.
calculate the middle of that stud. Like,
Yep.
whoa, that's cool.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing when I go to theater. Um, I see it twice as hard. I know how the magic is done, but I see it twice as hard and get so much more out of it because I know how it's done, and I know
Mm,
what's happening, and I know what I'm looking at, and I know what I'm looking for, and it's just so cool. And sometimes I'll say to my friends as we're leaving, "Did you see that?" And they're like, "Huh?"
all
Oh,
that
that.
potential that I was looking
Oh,
at. Yeah,
oh, that's why that was so effective. And I'm like, yeah.
that's cool.
So yeah, if we could if we could go back to where quality mattered instead of quantity, we'd all
Well,
be better.
it comes to value statements, right? Our
Yeah.
country is run off the idea that if you can make quarterly earnings reports look good,
Mhm.
well, then apparently you're doing something right. Which doesn't
Yeah.
make sense, man. That doesn't make sense at all. That we should
No.
yeah, we should be basing things off of like 30, 50, and 100-year projections, right?
Yeah.
And because right, I want to make sure that right, we're building something better and not just taking away. And
Yes.
one of the most hilarious movies I've ever seen, Don't Look Up. Oh my gosh, man. There's some people who got really upset by that. Have you seen that on Netflix? Don't Look Up.
I haven't. I'm got it on
It's
my list
I
for the.
laughed out loud at least a dozen times, like by myself. I was with nobody else, by
Yeah.
myself. It just pulled it. I mean, I literally guffawed like a dozen times.
Oh.
And the whole point. So David Sirota, one of the executive directors, talks about that the whole point of this is to show that people who just have like billions and billions of dollars just don't play by the same rules. Like
No. Yeah.
it's not that this part of the citizenry are stupid and this part of the citizenry is smart. It's just like there's people who just bypass the rules and they just control
Yeah.
everything. And
Yeah.
really the only way to fight back is to show up. And really the only way that you're going to be able to show up is to be inspired, right? Americans hate to be
Mhm.
compelled. And yet that's all I
Yeah.
see in political discourse now is compulsion. You better do
Yeah.
this, right? You better, don't you know how smart I am? Don't you know that if I'm a dick to you
Yeah.
right now, that you're gonna somehow feel like you need to do something? It's like, come on, like, and so that's
Yeah.
actually fellowshipping with the Mormons has taught me that what if I actually be friends with people? And once I'm friends with people, what if I can then see the values that drive them? And what if once I see the values that
Mhm.
drive them, I can then incorporate that into my own heart to figure out kind of that how and figure out like
Yeah.
how's the bridge? How is a bridge constructed from where I am to where they are? And it
Yes.
and since so I surround myself with superhero iconography as well. What I
Oh
like
yeah.
about that is I see that as an, again, iconography. It's an icon. This is an icon to
Mhm.
greatness, an icon to goodness, an icon to God is what a
Yes.
cross is. It's not a an idol. An idol traps, right, and captures,
Yes.
right, the
Yes.
beauty of divinity, and it doesn't let it get any better or and it's like, and so like this idea of like we have this all powerful God, but he's only got this one way to think. It's like, what?
Yeah, that's not the way it is.
Yeah.
And the highest levels of Mormonism acknowledge and teach that all truth can be circumscribed into one great whole. And there isn't just one truth, it's found everywhere. And as
Well,
you get looking, you begin to see that. The truth is everywhere. Everyone has parts of truth. And it's what they do with it that matters. But truth is everywhere and everybody has some. And that's the whole thing.
I grew up reading fantasy novels. A lot of that
Yes.
Terry Brooks.
Oh, yes.
A lot of Terry Brooks and so I say Shannara because I grew up with Shannara. I went and listened
Yes.
to him live and he said Shannara and it shattered me. It shatters like Shannara. No,
What?
I know better than
No.
you. I
Yeah.
know. But well, and here's the thing is that by reading these books, I didn't have any sort of meaningful parentage to help me understand what morality was or how to be a good person. So I learned
Yeah.
it from reading books. That gave me a truth. That allowed me to be a better person. That,
Yes.
just because it's fiction doesn't mean it's a lie. It can be more than
No.
true. I
Yeah.
can then
That's
identify with it in more like you're real.
yeah.
You're real. I can identify you in the ability that I can identify with something real. This is now
Yeah.
something meta real. I can now compare myself to every aspect of what this does and how I relay that to my life. So it can be
Yeah.
more than real, which is what a lot of people get out of the Bible as well. Is that
Yeah.
this just this more than real, this like, hey, this is what a great person did, right? And
And
they
that's what
sacrifice.
writing is
Yeah,
about.
yeah, it really is.
Remember Bean's big bulletin board, constructing a world of meaning out of words?
Yeah.
Yeah. With the blueprints and the pieces of wood and stuff. Yeah, that's
Yeah, there's something about that. I think now is the time to capture the imagination of not just Utahns but Americans,
yes.
especially like the most interesting thing to me, I think, is that our former president, like the coolest thing he could have possibly said was Space Force, and yet it was like one
Yeah,
of the things that he got made fun of the most for. And it's like, what, man? Like, what person in this country doesn't have somebody that's connected to their life that doesn't love Star Trek or Star Wars?
nobody.
Yeah,
They are sad, small people with no hope for the future.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And
yeah.
we're the second driest state in the nation, right? We're
Mhm.
learning how to create graphene. Well, let's create a moonshot to mass produce graphene, man. Graphene
Yeah,
can create membranes that can passively desalinate water. Hey, that sounds
yeah,
useful. Elon Musk wants to eventually build civilizations on Mars by terraforming. Hey, we've got
uh-huh,
deserts here. Let's see if our
yeah,
technology works, on Terra, right? On
yeah,
Gaia, right? On
yeah.
Gaia
Try it
here,
here
right?
where it's less expensive
Yeah, exactly.
and
And
would
then
benefit people immediately.
yeah, and then if we get graphene, well, I mean, come on, baby, elevator to space. I mean, how do we
Oh,
like, yeah,
yeah.
I mean, where are we gonna stop? And so like, we can't pay you a living wage while you're in this, hellscape of environment being yelled at people as you're standing in front of a cashier at McDonald's. Like, well, how about or a cash register at McDonald's? Like, how about if it's that meaningless that we can't pay them more,
Mm-hmm.
where they have to be starving, where they have to be on welfare. So they're actually like, so now the taxpayers are paying McDonald's money to hire somebody and underpay them. Um,
Yeah.
how about if we have to pay them more, they'll automate? Well, let's automate, man. Let's just get rid of those jobs and put people in a job that isn't going to make them so miserable. That's not going to steal their life away from their kids. That's going to be able to actually provide some meaningful framework of how to think so we don't have riots in Minnesota or a bunch of scared people like going to tear down the nation's capital, right? And it
Yeah.
seems that having some inspiration to insulate, hey, I've got a good job, I've got some
Mhm.
great money, my kids are fed, right? They've got a great
Yeah.
education. You know what? I don't really have a whole lot of reason to be angry. You want me to show up and be angry? Like, I'm not feeling it.
Why? Yeah. Yeah. And that's what it has to be. That's one thing that some of my conservative friends and I go the rounds on. I'm not particularly conservative,
You
to be
don't say.
frank. Yeah. But I'm like, why do these people have more money than they could possibly spend? And yet the people that work for them can't survive.
Right.
Amazon's warehouse is a nightmare because you have to work so hard and so fast that it burns people out. They're just burning through people like crazy. Why not hire more people and make that job doable? And then why not pay them a living wage?
Well, and so there's a
And
probably my
everybody says,
favorite
well,
capitalist.
well, they had the idea for this, and so they should get all the money from it. Well, okay, if you can take that idea and by yourself do it,
Right.
you get all the money for it.
Yep. Yep.
But the people that you have to bring in to make your vision work should get
Well,
most
you're
of the money.
using roads that the entire, society is paying for with their
Uh-huh.
taxes. Your people, right, that hospitals, right, were put in place to make sure that these people were healthy. School systems
Yeah.
were set up to make sure these people were educated.
Uh-huh.
Right, public transit is set up so they can actually get to your jobs, and like, so
Yeah.
you got to keep all of it, dude. Horse shit. Sorry,
Yes.
but yeah, no,
Yes.
man, no. Like, we need to
Exactly.
have, right? You don't just get to devour and devour and devour, right? A businessman is not a black hole. Like, we should not be doing that, right?
No.
Like, it needs to, when your cup overfloweth, it should overfloweth, right? And then
Yes.
right, and help
Don't
those.
just keep
Yeah,
building a bigger
you're right,
cup.
exactly. You're right. We don't need
Yeah.
a bunch of Uncle Scrooges with like this, like, money bin from
Yeah.
Tailspin as they're trying to like swim through, and then we literally create Jeff Bezos into Lex Luthor. Yeah, no thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Not gonna shouldn't happen.
Yeah. So this might be a bit of a hot button thing, but and
Mhm.
if it is, like, feel free to, like, not have to jump on it, but if you really want to see, like, how far this goes, which is crazy. So Neil Young recently said, Joe Rogan said
Yes,
stuff that I don't like. I'm gonna take my money, or I'm gonna take my music away. It's
nice.
like, well, okay,
Uh-huh.
well, where's Neil Young music right now? Oh, he already sold it to Hypnosis. Who owns
Yeah.
who owns Hypnosis? The Blackstone Group. The Blackstone Group? Who's the Blackstone Group? Oh, they're the ones that are buying up every single house in America, jacking up rent prices, and wants to turn every American into a renter. So you are robbed of the American dream. Who's the
Oh,
CEO of BlackRock? Oh my gosh. Or who's on the board of BlackRock? Oh, the former CEO of Pfizer. Oh, that's weird. The former CEO of Pfizer, who's all connected to all these guys. Oh, hey, Lex Luthor. Hey, what's Neil Young doing now? Hey, you want to
mhm.
hear my music? Go to Amazon Music. Like, bro, what did David Crosby, his former bandmate, say of Neil Young? The most greedy person he's ever met in his life.
Wow. Wow.
And so now it's just all about the Benjamins, man. And then it's
Yeah.
like, look at, like, and then you see all these people who have no ability to think critically because they're starved for food and
Uh-huh.
resources, right? Maslow's, Maslow's
Hierarchy.
first step is there, but the second is translucent. It's a kind of like it's not exactly there. Third one
Yeah.
absolutely is not there because you obviously wear the wrong color of shirt. Didn't you know? You have to
Yes.
wear the right
Yes.
color of shirt to be part of my community, which then means
Uh-huh.
that you're completely bereft of pillar number 4. You've got no respect for yourself because you're constantly screamed at. You live in
Yep.
this Jungian shadow realm because everything that makes you uncomfortable, you're supposed to then project onto somebody else. You can't take accountability for it, which then robs you of self-actualization and actually have that divine purpose to breathe something from nothing.
Yeah.
And so if we really want to find divinity and purpose, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I'm convinced, is the biological way to get there. And
Yeah.
my latest testimonial I gave to the Mormon Church is that epigenetics and the way that the pressures of life force new code out of your latent system to build
Uh-huh.
the system stronger is literally how you build the temple to speak to God, by
Yeah.
making yourself stronger.
Yes. Exactly. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you should be, once you're strong, you strengthen your brethren.
I mean, that's part of being in the community, right? I
Uh-huh.
mean, there's a reason
Yeah.
why humans have lived in communities, right? For
Yeah.
safety, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to go live out on your own, well, certain you can, but there's a lot of troubles that come with that.
Yeah. A lot of trouble. But once you've got yourself where you need to be, strengthen those around you.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it's about. I mean, there's really, and
Mhm.
so if we're all created in the image of God, when you infuse divine purpose into others or you're trading divine particles, well, you can't help but be infused with more divinity. And if you look
Yeah.
at it that way, it doesn't like, and the best part about this is like Morpheus, you don't have to believe what I believe in order
No.
to gain the benefits. And that's what's beautiful about it. And that's what, so
Yeah.
the second that I demand that you have to believe what I believe, well, now I know that I'm now living in this Jungian shadow realm. So I try to be
Yeah.
very suspicious of my own presuppositions. People like Cornell
Uh-huh.
West and Jordan Peterson help me with that to really unpack what is it I actually think? What are
Yeah.
these presupposed unarticulated ideas that knock around in my head that I don't inspect and I just mouth regurgitate, right? In order for you to like think again, like I'm Dr. Phil, like, don't you know how smart I am?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah, I think that's the point of life, like you said. Like
Yeah.
once you're strong, make others stronger.
Yeah. And so many people are losing sight of that. And it's just like, I'm strong, now I'm going to get stronger. Wrong.
Well,
Wrong. Wrong.
if
Wrong.
you're
Wrong.
bringing others with you, like if I hey now I'm a
Oh
Super
yeah.
Saiyan. Now that I'm a Super Saiyan, I'm gonna go to level Super Saiyan level 2 while I become a Super Saiyan trainer and help others get to level 1. I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally cool
No
with that.
problem with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I have quite loved this conversation.
This
Um,
has been fun.
yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And I think that so I'm much more conservative than I was. But I think what I love most about this conversation is that there's obvious areas where we could disagree, but
Oh, yeah.
the most meaningful path forward is to carve out the areas where we agree, man, and work together.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Find out what you have in common and move from there.
Yeah, because you know
And
what?
it,
I probably wouldn't have built the set that you wanted to build, but
uh-huh.
I'll be damned if it didn't turn out pretty awesome.
Yeah. Yep. And it was because I had your help that it did.
Well, and that, you know, because I had your direction, I was able to do it, right? And this
Yeah.
is the feedback. This is the community feedback.
Yep. That's exactly what it's all about.
Yep, awesome.
So, yeah.
I love it. Well, you know what? I feel like the force is strong with this one.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Yeah.
I want it to be.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's about radiating goodness, right? I'm
Yeah.
starting a YouTube channel called Towards Goodness. And I
Ooh.
wanted to have a lot of inspiration, and I share a lot of my ideas, a lot of my writings. You know, I've had about 5 different editorials and letters to the editor in Salt Lake Trib and Deseret News that have been published. So I have an ability to capture the imagination, and now I need to do that in a legislative capacity because
Yes.
we need to direct that actually leads to the spiritual fulfillment of right of our populace, and not just like, hey, I'm doing stuff, I'm a legislator, look at me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it should be, yeah, for the good of everybody, not just for how cool am I.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, maybe
I
we can
sh-
have a round two sometime. That could be fun. I'm
I'm
sure there'll be another
I'm
education
game.
bill that'll turn your head on fire, and then we can talk about that. But
Oh, I'm sure there will.
um,
Like I say, they're always trying to figure out how to make our jobs more difficult and our
yeah,
lives more miserable.
yeah, yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, I hope that we can get out of our own way, and we can actually
yeah.
help others be their best selves. And that's my
Yes.
point. And you know, maybe I'm
Yes.
naive, you know, but I hope I can
Uh,
also inspire people
I
who
would say
kind of
hopeful
okay,
rather than
I like that.
naive.
I like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Because that's what it is.
well, coming back to Cornell West, right? Here's a
Mhm.
quote from him. Well, sorry, I'm glad that you said that. I cannot be an optimist, but I'm a prisoner of hope.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that because right now I can't be an optimist, but I am a prisoner of hope.
Yeah,
Oh, I thank you so
you're welcome.
much.
You're welcome.
I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. He's my Papa Bear, right? Cornell West. So I live in a world where I try to get Jordan Peterson and Cornell West to look at me and be like,
Uh-huh.
that guy gets it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
awesome.
That
Well,
sounds
thanks.
happy.
Yeah, yeah. And
Thank
so,
you.
you know, I'll let you. I'll ping you once I do officially announce. I am hoping that I can get some authentic, just kind of grassroots, you know, movement. Part of that's gonna be from the churches that I give testimony to, in
Yeah.
order to help out. I'm even gonna go to the church in my neighborhood. Gonna go help clean it in an hour, because like that's what it's about. It's about helping the community.
It is. It totally is that. And if more people would get that, we'd be a whole lot better off.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
you're
Well,
on the way, my man.
you know what? I
I'm
love it.
proud of
Thanks.
you.
Yeah, well, you know
I
what?
am
Thank
proud
you.
of you.
Thank you. And it's about like, you know, I couldn't be here without people who have kind of helped me along the way. And
Yep.
so Kevin Spacey aside, I do want to go ahead and pay it forward. Right.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
there's something about that, right? That gives me purpose, that gives me legacy. And that
Yes.
really that makes me think that if there is a God beyond just this goodness that I've tapped into, that
Mhm.
God would look at me and be like, good on you,
Yep.
man. Good on you.
Yep. And I'll tell you, he sees that effort and says, that guy's okay.
Yeah.
Because he's trying from where he is to be the best that he can.
Yep.
And that's what it's all about.
I agree. I agree.
So, okay.
To being the best. All right. Well, you know what, Terry? You have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. You as well.
Hey, my pleasure.